All right, so I'm just waiting here in front of a restaurant downtown to meet a guy for a Honda Rebel. So I'm really curious to see if this bike's in good shape, if he's willing to come down on price. The price is already pretty good, so I wouldn't be upset about paying the full 1,400. But if I can get down to about 1,200, that would be pretty awesome. So there's a small handful of things that would make me absolutely walk away from this deal. One of those would be if he doesn't have the title. If you buy a bike without a title, it's a really, really big pain. You might not even be able to get it registered or get legal plates on it. So you might have a bike that works perfectly fine, that you paid a low price for, but it's not really worth the hassle. The other problem is that if they don't have a title, that means that the bike could have been stolen, which is a big old problem, and that means that you could be buying a bike that the police come and scoop up a week later. All right, so now I'm cruising over to the bank here, and I managed to get him down to 1,100. I'm also gonna pay him an extra 15 bucks for just bringing it over to my house, because that just takes away a headache. Alright, so here's the bike I managed to pick up. This is a 1999 Honda Rebel 250cc. At first glance, this actually looks pretty nice. It's a pretty well put together bike. There's not really anything major that's wrong with it from first sighting. But when you start to look a little bit closer, you can see that this bike needs a little bit of love and affection. So a lot of this is going to apply to a lot of used bikes that you're going to find out there, especially that are on the cheaper side of things. Starting from the bottom and going up, I always like to take a real critical look at the tires that are on the bike. A lot of times when someone's going to sell a bike, they won't bother to replace the tires. They'll usually be kind of worn out, either from a lot of usage or even just from time. Tires do degrade over time. Rubber can get hard and crack, and that's not a great thing. So I would definitely say that if you're buying a bike first, you can maybe take it home if it's a short drive, but you really want to make sure that you get everything taken care of before you really start riding it around and just using it like your everyday bike. Coming up from there, definitely the next thing you want to check is the brakes. You definitely want to have good brakes, especially if you're starting out. You want to make sure that you have solid brakes. You want to be able to trust them. You don't have to second guess yourself. Now the Honda Rebels have a disc front brake and they have a drum rear brake. The drums tend to last a really long time. They're not really great brakes to begin with, but usually those are less of a concern, but your front brake is what's doing most of the heavy lifting. And on this bike, the brake pads are about the thickness of a quarter, so we want to get those swapped out as soon as possible. Next up, I can definitely tell that this bike was dropped at some point, at least once. One of the more major signs of that is that it has a bent brake lever. The gas tank has also definitely seen better days. I would guess that this bike was maybe stored outside or just not taken care of super well. It has some damage on the paint. It also has a bent shift lever, which I'm hoping I can salvage. They are a pretty cheap part, but it is just bent, so I'm hoping that I should be able to just get that fixed and sorted out. And then a nice little extra is that it did come with a windscreen. I'm really not happy about the position of this right now because it's kind of just smacked on there and it doesn't look super great. But I'm hoping to either adjust that or just remove it entirely and maybe sell it on the side or just sell it along with the bike. But so we've got our work cut out for us, but at the base of it, this is a pretty solid bike. It appears to run really well. Just purrs like a cat. Doesn't seem like it needs any major attention, but that's what we're looking at right now, and let's get started. All right, so the first step we're going to take here is just removing this brake caliper. Just 2 bolts, pretty easy. We'll need to get this off to get to the brake pads and start cleaning everything out. You can see that the old brake pads are very worn down and pretty much useless. And the new ones are a lot thicker, a lot more able to stop the bike. For removing the tire, we always like to start out with water and soap. This just kind of gives you some lubrication, makes the whole thing a little bit easier. And then you just kind of go around the edge. You want to break that seal, like right here, and just kind of work your way around. And then from there, it's the slow process of shoving your tire spoons in, getting a lot of leverage on them, and slowly getting back every little bit. You can definitely do this on your own. I've actually done this several times now. If your tire spoons are smaller like mine, you're really going to have to put some force on them. I did actually order some rim protectors, but they hadn't come in yet, and I just got impatient.
I would generally recommend using those, but this took a little bit longer because of that. But doing this on yourself, you do save about $100 a tire, so that's not too bad, especially considering that the tires themselves are about 70 or $80 a pop.
All right, so we've wrestled this tube out of here. Something you definitely want to do, especially on an older tire like this, you definitely want to spend the extra money to buy a replacement tube. These things are actually usually your weakest link. A lot of the times if you get a flat tire, it's not actually that your tire has a puncture, it's that the tube has either gotten bad and just expired, or that it's rubbing up against something in the wheel itself, like rust can happen on the inside. So just spend the extra money. I think they're like 10 or 12 bucks for a new tube, and that way you won't have to find yourself in the same spot in like 2 months when the tube goes bad and you got this brand new snazzy tire. All right, so just to underscore the importance of making sure that your tires are in good shape, these are so bald and flat and lacking in really any sort of grip. I don't think these could stop water from falling upstream. Over here I've got the new tire, which should be a little bit easier to put on, and we'll see how this goes.
So putting the tire back on the rim is basically the same process in reverse. You do have to go ahead and pop the inner tube in. You want to be careful it doesn't get bunched up or go on any weird way. But nothing too crazy. It's not super difficult. And then you just go over and inflate your tire. And I have a bike pump, so this took a while.
All right, so we're now on day 2 of the Rebel restoration. Today, the main goal is to get the new tire installed. We want to get our brake caliper sorted. I've been letting this other caliper that I have laying around just soak overnight in brake cleaner fluid. So we're gonna handle that because the other one is garbage, as I will explain later. And other than that, I'm gonna try and give the shifter another shot. I did find a little tip online about how you can bend it back into place. I don't know how well that's gonna work, but it could be better than just ordering another part, which is gonna take another couple of weeks to get here anyways, so it's worth a shot. Now, if you know me, you may know that when I get a project, I kind of can't think about anything else. I get very hyper-focused on things like this. So I really want to get some headway made on this. So now I'm out here in my worst clothes that I don't care about getting dirty, drinking day-old coffee at 8 a.m. on a 23-degree Colorado day. Because this is what I like doing. So the situation I ran into yesterday was the caliper that came with the bike. These pistons are so seized up and bad that it's really not even worth trying to resurrect this and get it working. So fortunately, I happen to have another Rebel 250 brake caliper just laying around for reasons. So I'm just gonna get this nice and cleaned up and get this all serviceable. Just wanna get all the little brake dust and gunk cleared out of there. So I've grabbed my roommate's toothbrush and we're gonna get going here.
Now, in most cases, you won't actually need to replace your brake caliper. It's just that mine happen to be in particularly bad shape. If you have a bad feeling about it, I would just spend the money to get a new caliper because it's not worth the risk, and they're also a pretty cheap part. Fortunately, reassembling these is pretty dang easy, but you will have to bleed your brake lines and just get all the air out of the system, so that's just an extra little step. But this is going to perform a lot better than the brakes that were on the bike before.
Alrighty, everyone. So we're back with the Rebel here. And I didn't manage to get footage of every single thing that I've done so far. I kind of got really focused on working on the bike, and I'm going to have to make sure that I keep footage up in the future. But I wanted to do a quick overview of everything that's been done so far. So now the bike is in a state or it's almost in a state where I would consider myself comfortable riding around on it. So what we've done so far is we've changed out the front tire here. You can see that nice Dunlop D404. It's on there. We have completely replaced this caliper because the old one was garbage. I replaced, it's going to be really hard to see the brake pads, but you can kind of see them down there. Brake pads are brand new. I did do I forgot to close that bleed valve, which is another thing I did. I bled the brakes because that was essential with changing out the caliper anyways. If we step on over here, you can see that the shifter is now in a usable position. I was able to use a trick to get that back into place, and basically all you have to do is if you grab
your largest wrench on hand, you can kind of get at it from the right angle and just kind of bend it back into shape. And you don't wrestle on it too hard, you shouldn't snap anything, and the position that it's at on the bike gives you some good leverage. That actually worked really well. I did have to cut off the old shift cover though, so I actually have a new shift boot coming in, and we'll just pop that back on. Shouldn't be too bad. So I ordered these shift boots that are supposed to go on the shift lever down here. They're kind of just meant to prevent your shoes from getting scuffed up, but I thought that they might fit on the bare metal, and it turns out that that was an incorrect assumption. So I've got another one over here. So if I were to slide this on now, it would kind of just be loose and squishy and not really feel right. So I need to find some way to pad this up a little bit before I pop this on. I can explain. So normally I'd be opposed to doing something that's this ghetto on a bike, but the shift boot's going to cover it up, and it's not like this is a super important part to have absolutely pristine. All right, so I've just sprayed the inside of this tube with some water so it slides on a little bit easier. And let's see how that works out. It's not the worst looking thing I've ever seen. Just for my own pride of work, I do want to do a few other things that are both going to make it ride a little bit better and also increase some of the resale value. So stay tuned for that. But for right now, that's going to be part one. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned on the series if you're curious about restoring a Honda Rebel or buying a cheap one and getting it to a good rideable condition.